Hey, welcome to AMA number 53. I'm David Atkinson. We have on Art Brock, the Holochain co-founders, Mary Camacho, Eric Harris-Braun, and we also have Marcus Phillips, who made a guest appearance about 6 months ago, was it? Maybe a little bit less?
That's right.
Yeah, so welcoming Marcus again with some developer training updates, but it's a really exciting AMA, and Mary's got a proposal to go a little bit more freeform. So I'm going to hand over to her in a second, just some quick updates. You've seen the announcement. So all incredibly excited with Holochain beta out. You can see and hear a little bit about meeting up with some of the team in and around ETH Denver. And I think we've talked about it a little bit internally, but just a massive thank you to everyone who's been along with us over the past few years. Matt Shooting and I were talking about this late last week, and we're saying like it feels in one way like a miracle and another way inevitable, and kind of both at the same time. But so many of you out there have been riding the highs and the lows and everything else along with us. And I think equally, just there are so many people that have come out of the woodwork and are just so glad that Holochain exists and starting to share their plans and ideas for what they want to do. So it's been, I guess, a bit of a transition AMA in that we're able to appreciate and thank everyone who's been with us for the last many years, but also look forward to what's going to change as we move into this just new realm of having Holochain in beta and beyond. So with that, Mary, I'll hand over to you.
Right. So I'm a troublemaker here today. And at the very last minute, I basically asked everybody if they'd be willing to throw out our structure for our AMA and play a little more loosely and maybe be a little more casual in our conversations. Mostly because we're really excited, and like a bunch of the stuff that people are asking questions about, like we want to hear from each other too, and we want to be in dialogue with each other, and we just have been working hard. And so this is also a moment for us to come together and chat, ask each other questions, and hopefully a lot of those will overlap with some of the things that people want us to be talking about here today anyway. So I just propose that we do it a little different. We talk a little bit more off the cuff, and maybe if we don't get to all the questions that people have, we can catch up on those again in the next AMA or one after that. But so it's a big deal. Like we just hit a big milestone. Holochain 0.1.0. I said it correctly. Beta. And I'm just, I don't know, I'm present to being here in the room with people who have been thinking about this deeply, deeply for so long, and really I just really want to hear, especially from you guys, Art and Eric, how this is, like what it means and to you. Start with that.
Well, I mean, I have to be honest. I'm really excited to be switching gears into building things on Holochain. When Eric and I met in December, when we were just at the phase of having the release candidate out, it was already pretty exciting how much easier it was to build things, and especially with like the scaffolding tool that Guillaume has made, how that really accelerates a process for being able to mock things up very quickly and scaffold them up, and then have a quick start to just be able to jump in and go, and how much more mature it is. And I really feel like I should be turning this over to Eric, because over the past weeks, he's been building on Holochain a lot. He's been updating a lot of our old apps and a lot of our not so old apps, but to make sure that they're running on beta, and has also done a lot to make those apps nicer and prettier, because we hadn't invested much effort in some of the UI and UX stuff. And he's been cleaning that up a lot so that there's actually nice things to see on Holochain. Do you want to talk about that some?
Yeah. What I'll do is I'll try to answer Mary's question. What does it feel like for you? And I'll get to that part, Arthur, that you're asking about the applications. I've been thinking about it a lot. I've been thinking about, well, we started this project quite a while back, and we have crossed over into beta. And it seems like something is weird. Like, does it really take that long to get to beta? And then I'm thinking about, okay, what's the difference between if you're running a project that's like, I don't know, an app, like an email client or a game or something like that. And what it typically means to get to beta is that you're pretty much feature complete, but it hasn't been tested and you want people to test it. But what we're doing is so much larger in scope. We're writing this infrastructure for distributed applications, which means that we're writing like we're creating a road system that people are going to put all kinds of cars and buses and trucks on, and that's going to take people places. And it's like the deep arterial ability of connectivity, like that has a different threshold for beta than the standard one does. And yeah, sure, Holochain, the HDK and the HDI is pretty much feature complete. That was the whole point, stability. We reached stability. But what really happened, I think, is that we have crossed a viability threshold. I'm super excited about crossing a viability threshold. That is what's really exciting to me. And this goes to what Arthur is saying, that with the apps that I've been building, I've been seeing how they are actually viable for people to use, and it's viable to build in it because we crossed the threshold of being able to build on any platform that you want to build on. We've crossed the threshold with the scaffolding of using all kinds of different front end tooling that you want, Vue, Lit, and Lit Element and Svelte. And it's going to be super easy to pop in new ones because there's a whole templating system behind that. And so like there's this level of viability and that comes from stability, from meeting people where they're at, that it's just awesome for this level of an infrastructure project to have gotten to. So that's my feeling. And there's this idea that I have, and I don't quite know where it goes. Maybe some of you can build on this, but it feels like there should be, and people talk about minimum viable products, like what is the minimum viable product for Holochain? I don't know. But what does seem like we've hit is minimum viable beauty. Like it is beautiful enough, not just in bling, not how like the end user apps look. It doesn't have to be that beautiful. It has to be like beautiful inside the sense of like, oh, I can do this. It feels comfortable. Like that level of beauty. And so I want to turn it and ask you, Marcus, you're a person who's been teaching developers how to develop on all kinds of platforms over the years. And is that right? Have we reached minimum viable beauty? I hope so. And that's what's really alive for me, that feeling that I have had, because for me, I got to just say, it's felt viable from the very start because I've known how valuable it will be. That's just not true for everybody else until you can actually see it and have it. So it's like, have we really gotten there? I hope so.
Well, since you asked, I have to admit, my superpower and limitation in the world is that I habitually look past the incidental complexity. So I have seen Holochain for what it is now ever since I first found it. And like a sculpture with the stone that doesn't belong there being chiseled away. I'm super stoked that it's in a state where we can play with it as it's intended to be. But in my mind, I've been playing with it that way the whole time.
I just, the thing that the threshold that we crossed for me that was like massive was what you pointed to, Eric, around it now can be, we actually can support it on Windows, Mac, and Linux, and like not ever being able to do that meant it really wasn't even available to get started for so many people. And like, it's not just about beauty, it's about accessibility. And like that opening, that's like, this is the first time we're cracking that open to people who might not have been able to start. And it doesn't mean that there won't be roadblocks or there won't be bumps in the road for them as they kind of get on a learning journey or whatever. But you have to be able to get in. You have to be able to get started on something. And that's a huge piece to have done. And like getting the team, the whole Holochain team, around that energy of getting that working for everybody was huge for me to be in, participating with.
Yeah, and I want to clarify, Mary's talking about developing on all of those platforms, because we've had a launcher for those things. The launcher is also updated to beta and includes in it our Dev Hub, which is sort of like an early app store. So in other words, you can install the launcher and then install apps as people publish them to the app store, so that there's tools now that make app distribution easy, and they're built into Holochain, and it's the launcher runs on Mac, Windows, and Linux, and it's really quite easy to install. And so I think both for developers and for end users, we've reached accessibility thresholds that just make it easy.
Yeah, my story about that is we went live with Launcher just a couple days ago, and I went and looked at it, and there's this new app that I'd never heard about. I had no idea who had built it, and it's actually like a version of Reddit on a Holochain that's quite beautiful. It's like, oh, if that is coming live at the same time as we're going live with this, it means that the tooling, we've actually been there for a while, but things are ready. And it turned as a person who's in the ecosystem. It's awesome on our Discord. So just that is exciting to see that kind of thing happening like right off the bat.
Yeah. What's shifted like for you, Eric? Like how is writing apps different now than it was, I don't know, 6 months ago?
Well, I think it's the same thing that's been for a lot of the early people. Is like, I don't have to be dealing with the fact that the DNA and the HTK, all of the underlying APIs for calling stuff is shifting on me all the time. So one of the things that I kept spending time on was updating to the latest Holochain. I don't have to do that now for 6 months if I don't want to. And it's that is really awesome because it increases confidence. It just makes things go. Of course, that's the way it's going to be early on. But there's even another level of usability, the kind of place that we can get to. So for example, something that's been added into the new launcher is that when a user interface is updated, it just shows up and says, update your UI, and it downloads the user interface and updates the UI. This is the kind of maturity. It's like kind of obvious, right? You would have to have that, but it takes time and energy, and it's not easy to do. So we didn't do it at first, but now we've crossed all of those, dot the I's and cross the T's kind of thing. But that points to another level of like, these things also show some of the underlying power of what's going on in Holochain, is that because every Holochain DNA is basically like an API, it means that you can create multiple user interfaces to the same API. And that is going to be really interesting to see popping up as people write a different user interface for Kanban or Taki Stickies because they like it better, or they want to tweak mine, the one that we put up there originally, and have another ones that have more functionality with the exact same DNA. That's a cool thing.
It's not the same kind of composability that you were talking about with clonable DNAs, but it's yet another way that it's composable, right? I just keep hearing that pattern over and over and over in the way that we're adding things right now. It seems like at every point we're making that flexibility, give the developers more of what they need to make exactly what they want.
Yeah. And I think the thing about it is it goes back to this viability. It's viable to do microservices on Holochain in a way that it is not viable in other platforms. There's a different kind of viability. Different kinds of applications will come into being because of the viability of that separation of concerns the way we've done it.
Mm. Cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think one fun example of that is newsfeed clutter, the Twitter alternative thing that we're starting to play with. We want to open it up really to broader community to say, well, what do you want Twitter to look like? What do you want? What are your sorting algorithms? What are, and you can customize those things and have your own experience while having the same data integrity on the back end be guaranteed by a DNA. And David, you had mentioned you kind of wanted to potentially mention in today's call that Eric and I have some of these outside laboratories where we're working on some of these projects because we don't have the bandwidth to do all these things inside Holo and Holochain organizationally, and yet there's like experiments needing to be done. And newsfeed, Twitter, is one of those. There's a name registry project emerging that is one of those. There's all the things in Lightning Rod Labs that I'd rather let Eric talk to, unless you wanted to poke him about that. Did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, well, I do, but keep going, unless you were just rolling it to me. Yeah, well, this came so. I guess for everyone watching, one of the major explorations for me as we've been, I suppose, so much focus has been on product and just getting Holochain to beta and moving Holo along to beta and hitting the roadmap and dealing with roadblocks has been building out the ecosystem. And I guess there's a few different ways of looking at it, but one has been a community of developers around our technology that for whom it really matters. And the other has just been thinking about the more commercial side of things. And as we're shifting gears as an organization into the beginnings of operationalizing the commercial, one of the things I find myself doing is thinking about, okay, well, what is beyond that makes it easier to bring in the commercial? And I guess what I'm saying is a little bit abstract for someone listening, but if we think about even Holochain as a subset of Scepter, and becomes in a way easier to conceive of something that is inconceivable when you're looking at it from something that's even more inconceivable, looking into the future and then looking back and just saying, well, we need this piece. And I guess that's kind of what I'm trying to do with this. Like the commercial adoption or product market fit is the same thing. And the best way that I know how to do that is to go back and talk to, Eric, Art, Guillaume, Nico, some of the people who are really for whom building Holochain or building on Holochain is just the only thing the critical thing that matters. There's no other architecture, there's no other technology. And I've been just getting into well, why is that? And what is that? And what's being created? Because ultimately, the adoption question could be answered by really looking hard at the problem and finding that, but it could also be looked from people like Eric or Art creating something that you just can't create anywhere else. The very reason they made Holochain, the very reason Guillaume has spent so many years in and amongst the core team. And if actually we're supporting those things being built, then there's so much more mimicry that's possible from other people. There's so much more that can be contributed actually. And so instead of just having beta and leaving the rest up to people's imaginations, starting to imagine ourselves. And so that's my long-winded way of saying with one of the things that to me has been phenomenal about getting to beta is we didn't get to beta with Art and Eric writing code, Art over Eric's shoulder, a pair coding like was happening in 2016 or 2017. We got to beta with a professional, dedicated team, and actually Eric focusing for the last year or so on Lightning Rod Labs and building out these experiments on Holochain, and aren't thinking about designs in Newsfeed and designs in NOM. So we got there with actually to absolutely, well, it wouldn't exist without these two guys already seeding the next thing. So I think we want to really take a moment to appreciate the strength and the power of that. But also to start to think about, like, then we've already got people seeding what's possible on Holochain right now. So that was a sort of a really long explanation to say, like, Eric and I then were chatting earlier today, and he pulled out something. I was asking this question, like, what were you even building this thing for? And he pulled out something he had never showed me before. Or talked to me about,
Okay.
which was Flow Place.
What is it? Flow Place? I've not heard of this one either. So I guess
You've
you
never
have
heard
to
of
tell
it
us
either,
all about it,
Barry.
Eric.
Well, this is Ask Me Anything, so I got asked something. So this also speaks to the thing that there are a bunch of other people in the ecosystem without whom this wouldn't have existed, right? So the Flow Place was a project that I built with Jean-François Noubel and Fernanda Ibarra. And what it was and is, it's still on the internet. This is the thing I was showing David, is a basically a space in which you could create groups, and the groups could create currency constellations where they could experiment in the world of the post-monetary world, where you could experience interacting currency types that are non-monetary. So reputation currencies, gratitude currencies, capacity currencies, you could build any kind. And we created a language, the extensible game format language, we called it, that allowed you to design currencies. And I have seen nothing like it. I mean, there's a kind of a way in which Ethereum kind of lives up to that, but there's no fabric of the group, social coherence that is built by this tooling. And so when we did this, and Arthur and I worked on it as well, it expanded into the Metacurrency project. But we saw a couple problems with it. We saw that there wasn't any good fabric for composability between the currencies and the groups. And there was like some deep underlying fundamental limitations of that. And furthermore, we knew that this thing was going to run as a single website. And so it was going to be enclosed. Somebody was going to own it, like the stock market is owned by the New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ, and they gain benefit from that. From a public good, there's a private benefit. And so there was a kind of enclosure that was going to be embodied in us doing that we knew we could not do if we wanted to live up to an unenclosable carrier, which is what Holochain provides. And so to be able to get to the kind of composability and the kind of underlying substrate that would host that kind of thing, well, it turned out that we had to build Holochain.
Oh, darn.
Exactly. So I think you can go on. Anyway, Eric was showing.
That was
me
really
earlier.
great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Eric. That was super cool. So this thing that you built before, or started building before, or whatever, have you been building it on Holochain now?
Well, it turns out that I have, but in a slightly different way, right? So Lightning Rod Labs has been building this project called We, which is basically next level groupware. And it has some really fascinating properties around composability. I mean, if you think about Discord, Discord is fantastic. Discord or Mattermost or Slack, you basically have your servers on the left-hand side, or your groups on the left-hand side. And then on the right part of the screen is chat. And then you can also have a bunch of channels in your chat. Well, and you can customize it more because you can put bots into the channel and stuff. But what We does is it says, okay, let's go full general. And let's say you still have your communities on the left-hand side, the groups. But then what you have is, instead of just having chat with channels, is you can drop in any kind of collaborative application, whether that's a Kanban board or a currency or a bunch of currencies or chat or video chat
or governance or voting systems,
or voting systems, or all those pieces. And you can just drop them in as what we're calling them, haplets, or Arthur likes to call them weeplets. I don't know what we're going to call the little units of composability. But furthermore, the thing about this is that it's a fabric where the groups themselves aren't just isolated groups. They're groups that can gather together by using these little apps as how they gather together. Right. So it's a kind of composability where, so for example, if let's say your group is a squash tournament or a squash club, and you want to have squash tournaments, well, you might have a calendar that you drop in, and all of the different squash clubs subscribe to that calendar. They all join that calendar, and then they have their tournament calendar all together. So they are federating by virtue of a calendar. So it's like this kind of way of creating fabric of collaboration that's just totally practical and kind of like brain dead simple, that we should have been able to do for a long time. But the current fabric always has somebody in the middle, has some kind of silo that needs to own the API about how that's going to work and then get money off of that. In the Holochain world, not needed anymore. Whoever wants to play the game starts playing the game, and they just can play it because they're all holding it and hosting it together. So I think it's a super exciting pattern for both composability and for taking some of the paths that are already happening around collaboration in the world, but just taking it to the next level. So to answer your question, yeah, if we create a bunch of different currency types as Holochain applications, you just add them into your group, they will play there automatically. It's like we didn't have to do a specific thing. It'll be part of that kind of collaborative fabric.
Well, that's cool. And I know you guys have done some demos of Wii and whatnot, but I'm sure those are going to evolve and start hitting the minimum viable beauty stuff.
Yeah, you're right. They haven't yet. Like for the last 3 months, it's been focused on getting this across the threshold. So that's been a little bit on the back burner,
right.
But it's now front burner for me.
Right.
I kind of want to actually respond to some of the questions that have come in about, so what does this mean now? Is there more beta? What does it mean for Holo? Like, I want to pull toward that stuff a little bit. And, like one of the things I want to say is there's more beta. Beta 0.1 is just the first beta release. We already have a beta 2 release, 0.2 release planned with some network upgrades and stuff on the security side. And it isn't planned to break apps. Like you might need to recompile apps. There might end up being a few new things that make it into the HDK, but it should be pretty a stable follow on from beta 1. And yeah, so there is more beta and there's more features and stuff planned for Holochain. They were just all pretty optional and advanced features. Like we really reached a kind of feature completeness and maturity for providing all the core functionality that we wanted on Holochain. And then like, what does this mean for Holo? It means Holo development can move a lot more quickly because it's not having to always be upgrading and updating for changing Holochain versions, but also we are hitting the phase then where things are stable and secure enough to actually be releasing commercial products like Holo on Holochain.
Right. I mean, and to really dig into that one a little bit more, because there's been a lot of questions, and it's not just the ones that came in for the AMA. This has been coming up on social media. It's been coming up as, in our help desk. It's been coming up all over the place. We haven't forgotten about HOT. We haven't forgotten about Holo. We haven't forgotten about any of those things, but we've been intentionally focused on getting Holochain to this stage over this line, basically, because it was critical, because everything else is dependent on it. And not only, and I'll move back into the Holo, but not just for building Holo, but we needed it out there because all the applications are being built on Holochain, and Holo is about hosting those applications. So it really is. And I love that we talked about this a couple of years ago. I want to like re-presence it again. We talked about not doing this big, huge marketing thing while we were in the middle of building because it didn't make any sense. What do you market when you're not ready for people to build yet? What do you market when you're not ready for a hosting platform to go live yet? You don't. You waste a lot of money if you try to market that. And we're never going to shill the coin. So we weren't going to do any of that. So we just kept talking about what we're building and why we're building it and what it's going to be able to do. And that was really important for us. It was a really important sort of process and way to like stay connected to our community. But right now we're really talking to developers primarily. Our audience, if you notice, we haven't been talking about Holo, and we haven't been talking about hosting a whole lot lately. And it's very intentional. It's not because we're not building it. It's not because we've forgotten anything. We are. But right now, it's the time to talk to developers. That's it. So you're going to see us talking a lot to developers about the developer journey, about learning how to get started, like figuring out what the gaps are as people begin building their apps. There's developers that are just finding out about us, and we're going to do a lot more to like do that reach out to people to learn about Holochain. But there's a bunch of developers who have heard about us that are going, oh, now's the time. Okay, great. Let me kick back in. Well, those folks need to like figure out different gaps and different things about their learning journey, which is why Marcus is here to talk about developer education some more and like what we're doing there. This is a huge, huge focus. And I'm going to come back to you at the end, Marcus. But I want to say a little bit more about Holo because we have been building, and what Arthur just said and what kind of lines up with what Zippy said about the difficulty of constantly changing out and upgrading Holochain is killer. When you're building what is supposed to be the large major application framework or platform on the thing that's the infrastructure that's still being built, you're not just updating one application over and over and over and over and over and over. You're updating 6 applications plus infrastructure components over and over. And that just becomes such a huge deal. We would move things forward and then spend a week and a half or 2 weeks with the team updating everything again to fix fix some major bug that had us stopped. And then we'd start building again with our features. And then suddenly we were doing another week or 2 of updating everything in our infrastructure again and again. So it was a big deal. And so it is super exciting to hit a threshold to go, okay, now we can build on something that's going to stay stable for a while. Now, we may need some things that are coming in beta 2 or beta 3 or whatever may come down the road, but it means that we can build a lot more and a lot faster without constantly stopping every couple of weeks. And that's just tremendous for us. So Holo is moving back into a solid build phase. There's going to be lots of things that are going to be in alpha. And the last thing I want to say about that's really, really super important is the security reviews that we were doing on Holochain are also critical for Holo's build. We need to know that Holochain is secure and capable and that has data integrity, basically, in order to know that Holo is going to work. And Holo is going to need some security reviews too. So there's just like this massive dependency that we've been waiting on, that this threshold is major in moving everything forward. So that said, now I want to kind of push this back over to you, Marcus, because there were some really cool questions that came in about education, right? And I think it's really important because you guys are getting ready to kick off another education initiative. And one of the questions that I thought was really cool is like, why is it 4 days? What are people doing in 4 days? So what are you excited about? What are you doing? And why 4 days?
So when you make a curriculum, if you enjoy the process of packing the information into its most efficient mode of delivery, for me, it feels kind of like a helix or something winding together, and you get to a point where there just isn't that much fat in it. And then whatever you're left with, maybe you can keep going with more practice, but you've trimmed something down to something that feels coherent and fun and clear. And that's just lands at 4 days for us. We've run this a couple times now. on smaller groups of people we could see in person, how they learn, what they're having trouble with, what they're finding easy. And that's just how the blend of theory alternating with practice feels smoothest. So those 4 days are a lecture first thing in the morning, a little bit of time to kind of like orient and answer questions, and then a lecture, right? Then some time to work on an exercise that allows you to play with that idea, and then a follow-up lecture that goes a bit deeper. I find that the second lecture of the day usually functions as a way of cleaning up what has been challenging for people who, the first time you hear a lecture first thing in the morning that's about a new piece of content, you're not exactly equipped with the right questions or struggles behind you yet. So that first part of the day gives you some of that to stand on. And then the rest of the day after the second lecture, after lunch, that's when you can kind of go as long as you want. You can stay after class if you're having fun, you want to work with other people. And so, yeah, the concepts we want to hit stack up from, in the beginning, it's just like the most basic fundamental ideas that you'll need in order to think in terms of decentralized applications, specifically in this model. And then it moves on to a bit more of the subtleties of like how Holochain solves a few of those problems in its own unique way. That comes in like halfway through day 2. When we get all done with all of that, those 4 days will be kind of like segueing into a hackathon period the following weekend, where in kind of a different open-ended format, people are going to be able to put their new skills to use. So those 4 days that we're dedicating are really focused on the actual learning of the nuts and bolts of like, what's everything I need to know? And then they get to open the throttle the following weekend on a more freeform basis.
So two things I want to say. One is like just a clarity for anybody who's listening to this right now, which is that the online immersive education that Marcus is talking about is for people who already know how to write Rust. And so this is not yet just your first introductory use a rapid application development tool to get a very quick up and running app done. This is learn how to think and use the tools and build for yourself as a full-fledged, Rust developer in Holochain, which is, I wanted to say that because I want to do a quick segue over to Art for a quick second, because we're doing something radically different than that at ETH Denver. Yeah, go ahead.
I love that clarification, and it reminds me that I should mention we did in the past teach Rust right before at the Austria intensive. We did the Rust curriculum and then the Holochain curriculum. And like you said, we are just focusing on Holochain this time because as we bring it to people, we want to stay focused on what people really need right now, and opening it up so that non-Rust developers can get both modules in a row is going to be our next step. I'm really excited about bringing the Rust curriculum back in and having a separate module that precedes this one. But since this is the time to really give people that have got a bit of enthusiasm and like their legs under them and they want to just use the tool now, that's kind of what this is targeted at. So thank you for bringing up that clarification.
Super cool. Super cool. Yeah. So we're doing something radically different at ETH Denver. And I kind of want to talk a little bit about that in contrast to what all you just described, because for one thing, we're taking what used to be hackathons that were 3 days long, and we're making them 1 day. And we're saying you can build a hack in a day. So Arthur, how can people build a hack in 1 day now instead of 3?
Well, because it's ETH Denver, we're calling it DApp because they're familiar with DApp terminology. So DApp in a day.
Yeah.
The thing that we're doing is we're just sort of skipping to the end. For some reason, the image that's coming to mind is that, from Princess Bride, where like skip to the end of the wedding type thing, just say man and wife, it's like, what we want to do is we're basically skipping over the part where you actually understand what you're building and where you understand Holochain and being able to just kind of walk you through the process with this incredible scaffolding tool that Guillaume has has built, and that we can just teach, we can literally take 15 or 20 minutes to teach you some vocabulary about how modules and DNAs and entries in the chain work and that kind of thing, and be able to kind of walk you through the process and links of being able to scaffold your own app so that you can make some requirements. We can help you with a design of what does that mean in terms of entries and links and that type of stuff, and then scaffold that up. And then you can be playing with, you have a front end that's talking to a back end, and you have tests, and you can actually start playing with it. We don't expect it to be a production ready app, but it's
Right.
the thing that I think people get out of this sort of DApp in a day kind of format is, wow, I actually get something that is like real time, fast, performant, was pretty easy to work with. Now I want to go through and actually learn the whole thing. That's when somebody would get in, Marcus's program, or go, actually go through the whole process of, wow, this is a platform worth actually truly understanding. So we're kind of skipping the understanding part so that you get to just get to the having something in your hot little hands that you can play with.
Yeah, the scaffolding tool is pretty amazing. Because Eric and I were just playing with it last week because we're trying to do a quick little video to show people really how simple it is. We're talking about a terminal application primarily. I think there's a UI for it, but I haven't seen the UI in a long time now, because the terminal app is just so easy to use. And it just asks you, it literally, like, you just follow through and answer a bunch of the questions. And, if you have any experience building any kind of software applications at all, you can make sense of it. You can get started. You can get something built, and it builds the front end, it builds the back end, and it builds tests. Like, it's an amazing, rapid application development tool, really amazing. So I'm actually going to be at ETH Denver, and on the first day, my partner Matthew is going to go there as well, and we're going to actually team up and build something in that first build a DApp in a day. So that's pretty exciting. I'm looking forward to it because I
just actually wanted to invite Eric to share a little bit about this scaffolding tool as kind of like Web3 on Rails. Do you want to?
Yeah, I love what you just said, Arthur, about skipping to the end. That's got me thinking about this whole thing, because it sounds almost heretical that you're saying, yeah, you skip over the understanding, and that it almost feels like it could almost be a little patronizing. But the truth of the matter is, I don't understand most of the things that I'm working with. What software is so complicated now that you download and you just use a module here, you use a module there. It's like that is actually what's necessary for viability as well. So back to this notion of viability. And the way to get started with something is to be able to use the full thing and tinker with it. You don't actually have to understand thermodynamics to run a car, right? You don't. You just start playing with your wrench and you take a bolt off and you see what happens. Like that, or a bicycle. You don't learn about gear mechanics and you don't know the math of that. You just play with it. And I think the thing that the scaffolding has done is it has delivered that in just such a powerful way. Some of you who are watching may have had the experience of using Ruby on Rails, which is, I think, what Arthur is referring to. When that came out, it was extraordinary because what used to be rather difficult to do, you actually had to understand how web servers really worked and what the interaction was when a CGI call was being made to be able to return the right variables and the whole difference between the front end and the back end. It's like Ruby on Rails created, in 5 minutes, you could type in a few commands on the command line, just like you can now with Holochain, and you would have your data model set up for the server. You would have your views set up that would render the data model, your controllers that would connect the two pieces together. It was astonishing. And I remember going to conferences, and the conference was about, I don't know, something, but the side room was where they were showing Ruby on Rails and how that would happen. And that room was overflowing and packed. And we've done the same thing for distributed applications, for Web3, right? You can create an app literally in 15 minutes that's running. It's the same kind of, it's got a crappy UI and it's not complete. It doesn't have all the validation. It doesn't have a million of the different things that you need to do to make it be a complete app, but you had a running app with Ruby on Rails. Same thing now. We have that on Holochain. So I can't, like, if anybody has had that experience, I just can't, the emotional experience of being in there and seeing that and going, whoa, that's what we now have for distributed applications. It's super powerful.
If I may, you struck on something that's kind of close to my heart. In all of my time working with people who are just kind of learning engineering for the first time, one thing I learned about that process is that it is actually rather surprising to new engineers that they are not supposed to understand everything in order to take steps forward, and that the most powerful tool you have at your discretion as an engineer is your ability to studiously compartmentalize and ignore one or another piece of the system. That creates a leverage that is a bit liberating. Whereas I think before you have that realization, you're much more likely to encounter a sense of imposter syndrome and like, how does anybody do all of this? So the fact that we've got some of that leverage, at our fingertips in the Holo domain, and obvious and easy to sort of like point to, so people can see what it is they're setting aside and say like, look, we'll crack that open when it's time. For now, you can just focus on this higher level idea.
Yeah, and the fact also that our scaffolding produces the user interfaces in Vue or Lit or whatever, all these different pieces, I think is super important, because if you have that, you can go look at what you're familiar with and you can see how it connects into and calls into Holochain side. So you can start from the familiar and go towards the unfamiliar. And I think that is an engineering feat that I think we've done something kind of extraordinary on, in the ability to create templates that make us be able to connect people from where they are into the part that's difficult. So that feels
let me just
important.
expand on that a little bit. Rails didn't do that. Rails didn't generate the UI components. So having the web components get built such that you can then rearrange them and that kind of stuff. Now you can worry about making it pretty. You can worry about making your UI, but now you have the component that at least has all the right data fields to commit the data into the chain, and like that kind of thing. And yeah, that's just a whole other level where where sometimes people would understand Holochain, but not understand how to make a front end talk to the back end, where people have experience with the front end and don't understand Holochain. Now, with the scaffolding, they're already connected, and now you can just start sort of tweaking and customizing. And that's why we think you can do a dApp in a day, is that we can just jump right to the tweaking after a 15-minute scaffold.
Great. I just for our team that's kind of out there on YouTube and putting all the links out, just definitely want to put out the landing pages for the ETH Denver events, as well as the landing pages for the sign up or the registration for the Dev Education in Immersive as well, in case that hasn't happened. Just seeing some cool things. I want to shift gears a little bit. We've been talking a lot about the developers and all the stuff that's new and what people can do, but this threshold is also a threshold for how we engage with the world, and the kinds of projects that we might be talking to, and sort of, we're stepping back in. It's not as if we haven't been in a lot of conversations in the commercial community, David, over the past several years, but what's different? Like what the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 months in the world and the market has really shifted. I mean, there've been a bunch of drops, there've been a bunch of chaos out there in the market. What does that look like? What does that mean for Holochain hitting this moment of beta release now, after kind of like the question and concern about so many projects in the wake of, the FTX issues, and prior to that, the other things that were going on with stablecoin, with Luna and everything. what does it mean for you? How things shifted for you in conversations in the community?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think like I don't know. I actually don't really know like where to start in a way. I guess probably the easiest way to look at it right now is there was a massive influx of talent and money into, let's call it, our industry. I mean, I think one of the most interesting things and why it's such a circular answer is I don't think the blockchain space or the Web3 space is fully our industry. I think, like, we talk a lot about opening up to the like we look at the successes of open source software. We look at the like the traditional software industry as well. We look at the regeneration ecosystem. So I think like that particular world, it's part of it. It's part of what we're doing, and with obviously we have the hot token, but we're also painting the way for different types of currency systems. And really interestingly, so it's also, I think, for us, I was chatting to a group today about token vesting, and I was explaining that we fully vested everything, and they're kind of like jaws dropped. But you also look, we're still here. I mean, Marcus, I know you're new to this particular conversation, but for the other people on this call, we're still here, and majority of the team is either here or is in the ecosystem, is building apps. So the traditional levers that people are pulling around retention and commitment through a release of tokens somehow doesn't apply. And so I have to I have to look at this thing over a long, I think we're afforded the luxury of looking at this over a longer time period, because we don't need to prove to ourselves that what we're doing is valuable. We know it's valuable, and we know we're committed. So then we're able to look, and if I look at the industry, if I step back a little bit and see what's happening, I guess that a lot of the things that we said didn't make sense have come out and not made sense. And they've really hurt people very badly. But it doesn't stop the fact that they fundamentally really haven't made that much sense. And then if we look to what trends are beginning to bubble away, the idea of real world assets or things of value being really important to the decentralized world, it's so strongly coming through, and we're just at the infancy. And that's something we've been pointing to for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. And it's something that a lot of our design patterns and currency patterns and business models come in. The final thing is, I think, like Mary, it's just maybe the two things that jump out to me for where we are right now, which might be useful for people. One is, and another conversation today, which is the third time this year that someone has been doing extensive research on different architectures and come out and said, Holochain is our architecture of choice. Right? And they've looked at Dfinity, they've looked at Urbit, they've looked at, I guess, different blockchains, they've looked at different open source tools. And that they're not people that have been persuaded by the charisma of someone in the team. They're people who have methodically worked through the documentation and tested different technologies. And I would expect we're at the really early stage of that. And when we get the people of that depth and credibility, what we're going to get is the flow of people that they talk to. And we haven't got that explosion right now in our ecosystem, but I'm expecting right place, right time, that will come. So what we're looking for right now are fundamentally the people who are laying the foundations. And then the other thing about this is, like, we still don't make sense in the blockchain world to the majority of people, but it also comes down to so many people who were building in the blockchain space over 2020, 21, 22, blockchain didn't really make sense to them, you know? So we just had a huge influx of talent that was following capital and following the capacity to create financial wealth in a short period of time. And as I said in the last AMA, the thing that's really attracting me about this is the inversion business model of what happens when things that used to be paid for become free, and what kind of creation comes from that. And at some point when that's really, really, really pertinent, and it can, like, for example, Alliance Block were talking with one of our developers the other day about some AI stuff and thinking, oh my God, we could be running that on Holochain without having to pay AWS. Oh, and the lights just started to turn on. Oh, this is what we could use it for. And we haven't tapped into any of this, but they're business models that make sense. The idea of tokenizing and having a speculative value forever, that's like gets the SEC worried. The idea of innovating so that something that was previously kind of monopolistically priced, but suddenly anyone has access to, that's the kind of thing that gets another group of people worried, but a whole lot of creativity. So that's kind of how I'm relating to everything. Art, I've got the finger. I'm excited to what you're going to jump up with.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to clarify a little, like the language in particular where you were saying about the things that we said don't make sense. In other words, the things we said don't make sense about blockchain or about the speculative currencies or about that kind of stuff. I think for many people, the hype is dissipating a little. It's a sobering look on reality that maybe there isn't just a free lunch that you get from gambling tokens that have no inherent value, that aren't I feel like personally, I have wanted much earlier release timelines and that kind of stuff, but there's ways in which I feel like it's really kind of right that we are emerging from the dust that's settling as the real viable, scalable, buildable alternative that isn't just about making a quick buck. It's actually about new infrastructure. That just, to me, that's sort of what the lesson over the last years is summed up as.
Yeah, I mean, for all this work, it's we know that everything's timing. And I remember sitting around rooms in 2018 and 2019 and talking about some of the things all together that were possible. But underneath it all, you had to believe in a decentralized future or a distributed future to even enter the conversation. And I think from where I see the world right now is from outside the Web3 space, GDPR and other things have come in, and so much has happened in the last 12 months even. I think there's a general acknowledgement that we're somehow shifting to a more decentralized, distributed architecture. That's crucial for technology, right? And then in the blockchain space, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. We're shifting to this idea that maybe you don't want to just take all of these crazy risks. Maybe you do want to do things right. Maybe you do want to really think about your currency system. And so I think in both cases, there's also just a lot more people with experience in this space. There just weren't very many people with experience, and there have been a lot more that have come in and they've seen, those bright lights weren't as bright anymore, and some of them are going to stick, and a lot of them are going to come around to the kind of things that we're doing. Like I talk a lot to one of the analysts at a major venture fund, and he's really well-respected game currency designer. And over the last couple of years, what he's really starting to move towards are essentially meta-currency design patterns, mutual credit design patterns. Just doesn't fully know it yet, but it's emerging. It's just happening through that conversation. So I feel like if we'd been really ready 3 years ago, we would have been too early. And I feel like the point for us is to be ready and available and all with the energy at the right time.
There's a couple questions that have come in from the community as we were just chatting that I'm noticing, and we're getting really close to the end of the time for this. So I want to do two quick things. One is I want to ask this first question about I saw something about scholarships, and I'm just going to answer this real quickly because I have it there. If you're looking at doing the Dev Education program and you're interested in registering or applying for that, please do. There are scholarships available. Every application is reviewed, vetted, and we're giving. We've got Holo is definitely participating in giving scholarships for this program. So please do. Just another thing, and I didn't get this in earlier, and I just want to say this before we go. Over the last week or so, I have been doing a lot of research on how to get support and funding to folks. We have a huge community in Turkey, and I just want everybody to know, we are really just heartbroken by the stories coming in, the pictures coming in, the constant, the devastation that's happened there. There is a great article out on Al Jazeera, actually, that you can just search or look up that lets you know all the different ways that you can give funding, contribute to support these people and get money to where it needs to be by the organizations that are on the ground giving direct support. And one of the things that I found through my research in particular was Save the Children is a great option if what you want to do is donate with crypto. They're on the ground, they're supporting across the different communities that need it, and they accept crypto donations as well, and they're high up on a lot of the groups that rate the nonprofits, the NGOs, about getting real dollars and money out to people who need it when they need it. I just wanted to share that, and I don't have like links and all that, but if you go to Al Jazeera and look up how to donate to this, you'll find it pretty easily. So there's a couple of other things. I don't know if you guys wanted to answer any other questions, or if there's any final thoughts you guys wanted to leave people with. All right,
and there's the white paper one, just really briefly. We had security audits done. One of the things we had to do was update our design specs, which had gotten a bit out of date, and that is being attached. It has a full, very specific design specific implementation pattern to the white paper that largely Eric has been leading the charge on redoing, because we never actually published a final white paper for Holochain. Anything else about those other questions pending that people were asking that we should address really quick?
I think we should wrap up. Hey, everybody, we're so excited to be going out into the world. We're going to be out and about. We're going to be at lots of events this year. We're going to be doing lots of educational events, whether it's this one or more to come in the months that follow. We're going to be in the Americas. We're going to be in Europe. We'll probably be somewhere in Australia or New Zealand, somewhere on that side of the world later in the year. And we're really excited. One of the big initiatives that we're going to be doing too is like really helping to activate the local communities. So stay tuned. There's lots coming. We don't have all of the details and everything for everyone right now, but over the course of weeks and months, this stuff is going to be coming out and you're going to see a lot more of us. In fact, I think we're going to be doing another AMA this month, even just because we're going to be at ETH Denver. We're going to be out in the world with people who are building things in a day. And hopefully we'll have some news to share about those in a few weeks. So see y'all later this month. And thanks, everybody.